everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. Great introduction, I appreciate that. So a lot of what me and my team do at HP is we think about the future a lot. And I think when you think about the future a lot, of course, you have to be comfortable with change. And when I think about change, I actually think that there's just so much change happening around us today that sometimes we forget how fast things are changing. And I wonder if just a few years ago, for example, if we had have been able to read some of the recent headlines in the news, I wonder whether we would have even believed some of the things that we would be reading and seeing these days. For example, an AI recently wrote a fully scripted movie starring none other than David Hasselhoff. And for you Game of Thrones fans out there, an AI also wrote the next book in the Game of Thrones series because George R.R. Martin was just taking so long. So AI are writing movies, they're authoring books. In China, for the very first time, a robot passed the country's medical licensing exam, took the same test, read the same books as the humans, didn't score a perfect score, but did very well, passed. And then late last year, for the first time, a robot became a fully fledged citizen of Saudi Arabia. So robots are now fully licensed medical practitioners and fully legal citizens of countries. In the US, we had our first commercial delivery using a fully autonomous truck. And I am so proud to say that to celebrate that auspicious occasion, it delivered one of humanity's most precious commodities, 5,000 cans of beer. Let the history books show. And scientists have now figured out how to store data on human DNA. It's now possible to store around 214 petabytes on a single gram of human DNA. While just down the road in Silicon Valley, close to where I work, a startup is figuring out how to merge brain tissue with silicon to create the world's next supercomputer. And of course, all of this change is happening faster and faster. All of these new ideas, these new products, these new services, they're being adopted faster and faster in the fabric of our lives. I mean, it took the telephone, 75 years to reach 50 million people, and it took Pokemon Go just 19 days. So things are accelerating, and so I think often we all feel a little bit like this. And so the question really does become, no matter what your industry, what market segment you look at, whether you're the CEO or an engineer, how do you keep up with all of this change? How indeed can you lead this change and not be led by it? How do you recognize these opportunities early, and how do you prevent from being disrupted and instead become the disruptor? So that's what I'd like to talk with you about today. And I think there's three things in my experience that are critical and important. The first one, I would say, and we've talked about this already today, is to focus on experiences. Technology is changing so fast that we have to focus on the customer and the customer's experience and think of technology as enablers of those experiences. The second thing is to really think about how those experiences are going to change over time. And for that at HP, we look at megatrends that are shaping the world around us, that give us a peek into the future of how life will be different 10, 20, 30 years into that future. And last but not least, and I think it's absolutely critical, is you could have a crystal ball. Of course we don't. But even if you did, you have to be willing to change. You have to be willing to constantly reinvent yourself based on all of that change. So for the rest of the time here, I just want to walk through each of these areas quickly and give you a better sense of what we mean. So when we think about experiences, I think we all realize that our physical and digital worlds are becoming more and more overlapped. They're fusing together. At HP, we call this blended reality. Now, it used to be, back when I was growing up, that technology companies were the only companies that really focused on technology-enabled experiences. But that's not true anymore, as we know. Whether it's finance, retail, education, healthcare, technology is a critical part of every company, of every industry. And I think the key thing at this point is how you prevent technology getting in the way of the experience. And how do you create experiences where the technology just blends into the background? The second thing I would say, and it does sound a little trite, but to focus and to really understand the problem you're trying to solve. And more, I think it's how a customer feels when they're using your product or service. It's no longer good enough to just do the job. You have to delight your customers. God forbid that they feel joyful when they're using your products and services. And I think the third thing that's absolutely critical, because I think if you ask many of us, we'd all want faster horses. We wouldn't know that cars were possible. So how do you innovate to provide experiences to customers that they want, but they don't know that they want yet? And I think that's where the art of innovation really, really becomes important. So let me give you a few examples. I don't know if any of you here have had an experience of going to Amazon Go store in Seattle. This is the perfect and the ultimate shopping experience. Basically, you walk in the store, you pick the products off the shelf that you want, and then you walk out of the store. People who have shopped there says it feels like, stealing, feels like shoplifting. And then you've got to be really careful you don't go to the store next door and start doing exactly the same thing. But this is a perfect example of an experience that's completely enabled by technology, but where technology is completely invisible to the experience. The second example is a HP example. I don't know if you're familiar here with Sprout by HP, but this is where we thought of a completely immersive experience that we wanted to enable, and we created a completely new product to give customers that experience. Now, we didn't use any new technologies. We used off-the-shelf displays, touchpads, 3D scanning, projectors, etc. We just assembled it in a very unique way. And it wasn't something that customers were asking us for, but when customers experienced it, it was like, yeah, that's exactly what we want. And so now this is a platform that's being used in education, for example, because kids can walk up and use this experience without being afraid of technology. It's easy to collaborate. Technology gets out of the way of learning, and we're seeing this become very popular in the education market. And maybe the third example that I particularly love is just imagine a day without music. For someone that can't hear, that's life every single day. So here's something called a sound shirt that someone who can't hear can wear, and they can listen to music. And they can feel the violins in their arms, and they can feel the drums on their back. And again, it's not something that someone would naturally say, I want that, but when they can actually feel the music, even if they can't hear it, provides a really special experience for them. So this is another good example of focusing on the experience first. Now, when we think about how these experiences might change into the future, we like to sort of look at megatrends. These are the socioeconomic, demographic, and yes, of technology trends as well that we think will shape the world around us 10, 20, 30 years in the future. And we start by focusing on people. Again, this is not about technology, but to understand how our experiences will change over time, how we pay for things, how we learn, how we stay healthy, where we live, how we work. So I'd just like to share very briefly 4 of these with you and give you some examples of how we're already seeing innovation hit the marketplace. The first one we call rapid urbanization. This is about the massive movement of people into cities. 1.6 million people move into cities every 10 days. Now, of course, as people move into cities, our cities get larger, and we have more of them. By 2030, we'll have 41 megacities, cities of more than 10 million people. 22 of those will be in Asia Pacific. 11 of the largest cities in the world will be in China, 2 of them in India. And of course, as people move into cities and they start earning money, they start spending money. So cities drive economic growth. Thanks to urbanization, we'll welcome 1.8 billion more consumers to the world economy over the next few decades. So you might ask, well, so what? Why does this matter? What are the implications? Well, think about it. How will we all take advantage of those billions of new consumers coming to the world economy over the next 10, 20 years? As we move into cities, we're starting to live in smaller houses. We're starting to share office space. How will we design products and services for those new living environments, for those new working environments? City living is driving new business models. Think the gig economy. We talked about the sharing economy earlier, and people who live in dense urban areas want convenience. Time becomes their most critical resource. So they're expecting everything to be delivered as a service. So urbanization is driving that everything as a service trend too. And of course, the other thing to think about is it takes a lot of resources to build cities like this. Do you know what? If we don't do anything different, by the year 2030, we will need the resources of 2 entire planets to sustain our current lifestyle. 2 planets. Now, whatever else happens, I doubt we are going to find another planet Earth within the next 10 or 20 years. So sustainability becomes not just something that we should be doing, it becomes something that we really have to do. And that's why at HP we have such a focus on that topic. And of course, megatrends aren't just something that are happening in the future, they're happening as we speak. So already we're seeing startups address these opportunities with new products and services. This is an example of a smart home. Each of these little cubes here is a self-contained home. And they're being stacked and racked just like servers in a data center. Now, the unique thing here is when you move or when you want to move, you don't have to buy and sell a home anymore. You just pull up a truck, you hitch your home to the back of the truck and you drive it to wherever you're going and you plug it into the similar rack at the destination. And I mentioned bigger cities. Well, there's also brand new cities being designed from the ground up. This is a city called the Great City, a design coming out of China, in fact, near Chengdu. So it's being designed from the ground up to be more efficient, to produce less waste. It'll include vertical housing for about 80,000 people. Surrounding that will be green space for growing food. No cars, you can walk everywhere. So it's not just busier, bigger existing cities, it'll be brand new cities that we see springing up. Predominantly in China and in India as well. And I mentioned everything is being delivered as a service, and I mean literally everything. This is a service where fashion clothing, luxury clothing is being delivered as a service. So if you remember the old Netflix model, here is a model where you can actually have 3 outfits out at any point in time for a low $139 a month. You wear, you put it back in a box, you ship it back, your next outfit is delivered to you. You don't have to worry about shipping, insurance, cleaning, anything. Clothing as a service. I came across a startup recently in New York that delivers socks as a service. So for anyone that loses a sock every wash, don't worry, every month a new pair of socks will hit the doorstep. I thought that gives SaaS a different meaning. Now, at the same time, our population demographics are also changing. You know, as humanity, the good news is we're living longer. And in general, we're having fewer babies, which means we actually have an aging population. We like to talk about millennials and Gen Z, but the reality is that by 2060, we'll have 3 billion more people over the age of 30 than we do today. We'll have twice as many over the age of 65, almost 1 billion. Now you can imagine the pressure this is putting on government services. Fewer people working, more people wanting to retire, putting a huge pressure on healthcare, for example. And so we see startups rushing in to address these healthcare needs. A huge amount of investment going into digital healthcare. In many countries too, we have shrinking populations, so our workforce is also aging and shrinking. And at the same time, we've got a whole new generation coming into the workforce soon, Gen Z. This was a generation that were practically born with smartphones in their hands. I think a recent survey said that 50% of Gen Z would literally give up their sense of smell than to give up their mobile device. Can you imagine that? I think it's true, right? If any of you have kids that age. Literally give up their sense of smell. And so we're seeing this impact the work environments that we have. You know, back when I started, it was cubes. Dilbert had a lot of fun with those cubes. Now it's fully open workspaces that look more like college campuses. Yes, there's space you can go and focus, but there's also space that fosters collaboration and innovation. I mentioned the healthcare problem. In the UK, there's a startup called Sensely that, because of the shortage of nurses, have developed a virtual nurse that when you check out of hospital, a virtual nurse will actually nag you to take your medication and make sure you do. And if you have any questions about your condition or what have you, you can interact with that virtual nurse, trying to address the shortage of healthcare professionals that we have. And in Japan, which is very much of an aging country, we're seeing robotics being used to help the elderly get out of bed and move from bed into wheelchairs, for example. Now, of course, it's always better to have a loved one or a caregiver to do this, but sometimes that's just not possible. So we're seeing technology being applied to some of these broad issues. The third one we've talked about, hyperglobalization. The world is basically getting smaller, more connected. Seeing the rise of digital platforms, and so we're seeing the rise of startups. In Asia alone, 143,000 startups are born every single year. 143,000. And they're scaling faster than ever before because they're leveraging these platforms to grow bigger a lot faster. And what this really means for all of us in this room is that disruption is the norm. Even startups that were doing the disrupting themselves a few short years ago are being disrupted today. And so for all of us, we need to constantly reinvent ourselves. And as we go global and we have employees around the world and customers and partners around the world, collaboration becomes important. And as everything becomes connected, security becomes absolutely critical. And this is why you see HP as a company so focused on security as well. Now, in a similar way, we're also seeing innovation spring up. Yes, we're all lucky enough to be here in person, face-to-face today, but maybe it won't be too far into the future where some of us may elect to join using VR technology. We'll see meetings start to happen in the virtual space. And at HP, when we're thinking about collaboration, we're not even limiting ourselves to planet Earth anymore. We're starting to think about what life on Mars will look like when Mars is being colonized. And we're teaming up with partners to imagine what a city on Mars would look like when there's 1 million people living there. It's called the HP Mars Home Project. And then we're creating that environment so that all of us here can put on a VR headset and just for a brief moment experience what life on Mars might look like as well. All right, well, bringing us back to Earth, I mentioned security earlier. I mean, it's getting pretty bad. I think there's about 4 new malware attacks every second of every day. 4 a second. So we're seeing startups spring up to protect our endpoint devices using AI. There's no way that people can identify these malware attacks, so we're needing to rely on AI more and more to be our defense for these cyber attacks as well. Now, the fourth megatrend I want to quickly touch on is something we call accelerated innovation. We all know that we're being bombarded more and more by cheaper, faster, more powerful technology. And yes, things are changing fast. And some of us might think, well, hey, that's just a blip. It's just a sign of the times today, but it will get better. It will not get better. Technology increases exponentially. If we think things are changing fast today, we have not seen anything yet. And so we're seeing everything around us become smarter. Everything around us become automated. We're seeing biology become the next software platform. As human beings, technology is changing what it means to be human. And at the same time, everything's becoming personalized. Not just digital products, physical products as well, through robotics and 3D printing. So we mentioned automation. Next year, GM said that they will put cars on the road without steering wheels and brakes. Do you know in the US, they travel 3 trillion miles a year, and they spend 75 billion hours in cars. I actually think today's cars will be tomorrow's restaurants, they'll be tomorrow's movie theatres, they'll be tomorrow's office. So when we think about the office of the future, it could be a moving office as well. I mentioned human augmentation. We're already seeing technology being used by factory workers at Ford. A typical factory worker has to lift above their head to fix the cars above them 4,600 times a day. It can get tiring on the shoulders. So they put on this exoskeleton and it gives them the power to do that without injuring themselves. It's just the start of what we expect to see. And scientists are also dabbling with digital life. This is a worm called the C. elegans worm. This worm has 959 cells and 302 brain neurons, exactly. Few enough that scientists are able to figure out how they're all connected. And so they've actually done that in software, and then when they turned on this digital simulation, the digital version of the worm moved exactly like its real-world counterpart, behaved exactly like an organic worm, but it's not. It's a digital simulation. Now, we are a long way off from doing this with human beings. We have 10 billion brain neurons, not 302. But scientists have started on that journey already. Now, you might ask why we look at all of these things. Well, we do this every year. We look at these mega trends, we refresh them every year. They've helped convince us that services, everything as a service is critical. Managed print services, device as a service. We're now looking at how we leverage AI across all of our products. We've launched new 3D printing business. We use megatrends to actually figure out where we invest dollars in HP Labs research. What sort of products we want to bring out next week, next month, next year. So this is integral to how we run our company now. And then when we look at disruptive technologies, there's a couple here that I want to quickly share with you. We won't have time to go through all of them, but I thought it might be good just to touch on AI and maybe blockchain. We all hear about blockchain, so what does that mean in the future moving forward? So if I think about AI, okay, as we know, humans love automating things. We've been doing it forever. But there's some things that we want to automate that we don't know how to do. We don't know exactly how we drive a car. We can drive a car, we can recognize an image of a cat, we can listen to human speech, but we don't know exactly how our brains are doing that. So there's no way to program a computer, to teach a computer how to do that. So instead, we have a lot of data and we teach computers to learn. So instead of telling computers what to do, we're teaching them to learn. This is why you hear these words machine learning, deep learning. They're all ways of doing this. And I think for all of us, there's been occasion where we've seen or heard something where we've thought, holy cow, this stuff is going to change the world around us. For me, I remember back when Deep Blue beat Garry Kasparov at chess. If any of you here remember that back in the 90s. What we heard was, oh, that's because the computer has a better memory. But there's no way a computer's ever going to win at the game of Go. The game of Go has more moves than atoms in the universe. It relies on human intuition. AI and computers will never beat a human being at that game. Until last year, of course, where AI actually beat the world's master Go champion. And if any of you are interested in this topic, there's a great documentary on Netflix called AlphaGo that I would absolutely recommend. Everyone started off thinking it was a joke, and then just to see the look on the Go champion's face when it realized it was playing against an intelligence that he'd never experienced it before. And the dismay that went around the world as that AI beat that human being. It was almost like the sky is falling down. Humans are redundant. And then in game 4, when the human won, it was an eruption of euphoria. Humans unite, we've beat these damn machines. But of course, the computer figured out how it lost, and it's never lost again. But I do still think there's hope, because at the end of that experience, that master Go champion learned how to play Go better than he previously knew how to play. And in fact, the world chess champion isn't an AI, and it's not a human being. It's a combination of the two. So what we're seeing is AI and people team up to be better than each on their own. Now, there are some people too who believe that we're heading to something called the singularity, right? Where machines become more intelligent than human beings. And then, this is, by the way, 2029, so set your watches. And because of this exponential rate of change, just a few years later, AI will be more intelligent than the collective intelligence of the entire human race. Now, you can believe this or not, but this is rational, intelligent people predicting this. But in fact, I actually think it'll be a little bit different. I think at least in the short term, we won't have Blade Runner superintelligence running around us. There might be some of you out there already, I'm not sure. But I actually think AI will be more like Amazon Web Services. Cheap, reliable, industrial-grade digital smartness. And just like electricity, you'll plug in to access it. And you'll only notice it when it's not there. Just like we only notice electricity when the lights go off, not when the lights are on. So 3 generations ago, the business model of the day was to take a manual tool and to make an electric version of it. Think a manual pump becomes an electric pump. And the entrepreneurs of that year and that age, they didn't know or have to care where the electricity came from. They just plugged it into the grid to access it. I think in the same way, everything that we formerly electrified, we will cognify. There's already so many startups that just take something that would benefit from digital smartness, add AI, and that's their business model. And they don't have to worry about where the AI comes from. They plug in and access it from the grid. Now, we're already seeing this. We're seeing AI being used to help doctors to detect early diseases like cancer in the MRI images that we all have now and again. We're seeing AI being used in customer support. Now, I don't know if this was true when you were doing customer support, Richard, but this is AI that can listen into a customer support conversation, and it can recommend you slow down, talk more slowly. Or if you're talking to somebody in New York, to interrupt more often. And think about when everything in the office gets smarter, okay? When just a little bit smarter, when we walk up to the door and the door automatically unlocks because it recognizes who we are. If we're on a call from the car and we're walking up to our desk, that call is automatically transferred to that desktop without you having to dial in again and then disconnect the mobile connection you've got. Where if a meeting gets rescheduled, your virtual assistant will automatically book a new room for you. And if it's happening over lunch, we'll order lunch for everybody. You don't have to worry about that anymore. Or if you're on your way to a meeting, people that are already there will know how far away you are and when you will be arriving. So no more guesswork about when will such and such arrive at this meeting. And when you get there, your presentation is automatically downloaded from the cloud, and off you go. No more 12-minute mandatory wasting time at every call. And then if the meeting is running late, or sorry, even before that, if you're on a whiteboard, that everything that is written on that whiteboard is digitized in real time and shared with everybody remote as well. This is actually a new HP product called HP Shareboard. And then if the meeting is running over, the office virtual assistant talks to your home virtual assistant to let your family know that you're running late and to look after everything in the home, from turning off the oven or resetting the lighting. Now, wouldn't that be good? It doesn't take that much extra smartness, but I think, why can't every experience we have at work be like an experience we have at Disneyland? There's really no good reason. This is what we're thinking of when we think of Office of the Future here. And of course, the reason that we can do this now is because we have so much data, we have the algorithms, and we have the compute. It just so happens that all of those GPUs that people use for gaming are fantastic for running AI as well. So all of these things are coming together to make this relevant today. And of course, though, it raises some big questions, right? How do we, as humanity, what does it mean if AI is doing all of our work? How do we earn money? Who pays taxes? I mean, these are some big questions. We don't know the answers to these questions yet. I look forward to finding out. Now, very quickly then, let me just give you a quick high-level view of blockchain. Now, this is a topic that you hear a lot about. You hear it in conjunction with Bitcoin, etc. So let me just give you my sense of what this means. I would say back when the internet first started, we built some things into the internet, like networking, like World Wide Web, that when you wanted to use them, you didn't have to pay somebody for them. They were just available to you. They were decentralized and available to everybody. There were a few things when we developed the internet that we didn't include in those early days. Identity, payments, social networking, advertising. And this coincided in the 90s with a surge of startups that started to move in to address these problems and these gaps. And a surge of VCs that came in to fund these startups to do this. And the interesting thing about the internet is that it's a winner-take-all model. So today, of course, we've got Facebook, we've got Google, we've got Amazon, that over time have become winner-take-all. They've become the dominant company. And as consumers, we need to trust these big companies to look after our data, our privacy, etc. And if we don't, what choice do we have? Well, we can stop using those services maybe. That's quite hard. Governments could step in and provide regulation. That's exactly what they're doing. But there may be another option. And so this is why back in 2009, when an anonymous pseudonym called Satoshi Nakamoto launched something called the blockchain that actually has a promise to reinvent how services are deployed on the internet. Now, let me give you a quick example. Let's look at payments. So think of the blockchain like a shared record book, all right? Now, let's say that Sue wants to send some money to Amir. So what happens is that Sue actually creates a transaction. I'm Sue, I want to send $5 to Amir. And that transaction is sent out to all of the people on the internet who have a copy of that record book or that database. And then what happens is that all of those people validate that transaction. They make sure it's Sue, they make sure she's got $5, and if all of them agree, they say, okay, it's a valid transaction, and it gets added to what's called the blockchain. And it can never be reversed. It's almost like you have 100 mates looking over your shoulder, making sure that everyone's doing the right thing. It's as simple as that. Amir gets his money. Now, what's unique about this, though, is that think about anything where there's a middleman involved. Think of retail, banking, anything. What blockchain has the potential to do is to disrupt every middleman role in business. So instead of a bank looking after transactions or an escrow agent in a retail transaction, you can implement that in software using a blockchain. Now, just to make that real, let's look at ride sharing. Okay, we talked about Gojek earlier. So Uber today is a closed service. If you want to use Uber, riders and passengers all connect to Uber, and Uber takes 20% of the transaction cost. Imagine a different way of doing this now, using the blockchain. Imagine instead what happens is that I'm here and I want to go to Orchard Road. So I put that onto the blockchain. I say, I'm Andrew, I'm here, I want to go to Orchard Road. Any service in the world can see where I am and where I want to go, and they can offer me a service to get me there. It could be a ride-sharing service, it could be a rickshaw, it could be bicycles, it could be anything. And as a user, I can then choose the method that I want to use, select which one fits my needs the best, and simply elect to go with that service. Now, what makes all of this work is something called a crypto token. So you might wonder, well, how does it attract services to the service? It attracts services because people would get paid in a crypto token that is associated with the blockchain. And they would be attracted to the service because they believe that the value of that token would become higher over time. So I'm going to go off and offer services to all of you here because I'm going to get paid in a transit token, and I believe, because the service will be popular, that that transit token will be worth more in the future, so I want to earn them, because these tokens are all traded publicly, and so all of this speculation drives adoption. So here's an example of how a blockchain service could completely disrupt and replace Uber, okay? And you can imagine how this could easily disrupt and replace any other internet service as well. So I think blockchain is absolutely disruptive, something we should all be thinking about. Now, I won't have time to talk about digital manufacturing. This is something that the next speaker will be talking about, so I won't talk about that here, but very quickly I just want to finish on a couple of thoughts around reinvention. So I think there's three things when you're thinking about reinvention that are important. The first is to define your mission broad enough that you can react to disruption. I think of Blockbuster versus Netflix. Blockbuster defined themselves as video rentals, retail rentals. Netflix defined themselves as content company. So when a new technology came in, video streaming, Blockbuster saw it as a threat, Netflix saw it as an opportunity. You know what happened next. The second thing, is that no single company can do everything themselves. We need to partner. We need to partner with our customers, we need to partner with startups. In this world of fast change, we have to partner, we have to be good at partnering. And the third thing is we need to take action. It's easier to move change direction of a moving a herd of wildebeest than it is to get them moving in the first place. So just start moving. Then if you need to change direction, you can course correct as you go. But if you don't start, you can never course correct ever. And as Richard said earlier, governments are doing this. We're seeing reinvention at a government level. We're seeing it happen all across Asia today. Indonesia was an example that Richard brought up earlier. Indonesia used to rely on its natural resources for its economic growth. It realized it couldn't do that, so it's investing to be the largest digital economy in Southeast Asia by 2020. It set a very bold mission. It's changed taxation laws, it's rolling out digital infrastructure across the country, it's leveraging its youth. 43% of the 250 million people in Indonesia are under the age of 25. So incenting those people to be entrepreneurs is part of what the government there is doing. And then Richard talked about Gojek as an example. It's working. Here's a company that fended off Uber and everybody else because they understood the local market better and were able to beat the competition because of that local knowledge. And we're seeing reinvention happening across businesses as well. So not just at governments, but businesses. I think for everyone, Amazon would be a great example. Who remembers when Amazon sold books online? Yeah. Most people, younger population day, would probably not even know that. Amazon does TV shows. It won however many Emmys last week. It's getting into healthcare, everything. And you know why? Because they changed their mission as they evolved. Their mission wasn't just, I want to be the most customer-centric e-commerce platform. I want to be the most customer-centric company. I don't care what industry and business that is, as long as my customers are happy. And I want to highlight HP here as well. You know, when we separated as a company into two, we changed our mission. I mean, we do PCs and printing best in the world, but we defined ourselves as a company that created technology to make life better for everyone, everywhere. So as technology changes, we as a company can change more easily as well. So focus on experiences, understanding mega trends, and reinventing yourself. And I just want to say that this is not easy. Here's a great example from history. The King of Prussia, when the train was invented, why would you ever take a train to get there in an hour when you can ride your horse for free in a day? Fast forward, the TV was invented. The studios said, it's a fad, it'll never go anywhere. People will soon get sick and tired of staring at a plywood box every night. How true is that? Fast forward again. There's no chance that the iPhone is going to get any significant market share. Now, I mention these because these are smart, intelligent people. Okay? Disruption is hard. We need to be constantly thinking about it. And I think this sort of sums it up for me, is that when all think alike, then no one is thinking. So, reinvent yourself continuously and disrupt yourself before somebody else does. Thank you.